All right, everyone, we should be live. Let's make sure that's actually the case over on Rumble, of course, where usually now it automatically starts up on its own, so I don't have to refresh anything. I do see that chat is working. We have my Mr. Tux. Interesting topic to discuss. Actual studies prove nicotine increases testosterone. The US and West were massive nicotine intakes for decades, which increased testosterone levels. Possible, although the average way in which a person gets nicotine isn't necessarily a healthy methodology by which to get it. Red Zepperin, my butt's been wiped. Russ Hanneman says clank. And 3 degree cut says clankety clank clank. We are indeed live on Rumble. Let me see. Oh, my co-host is gazing off into the distance. There. It's staring soullessly into your eyes. Yeah, I heard about the story with regards to Miss Universe Netherlands. I talked about that a couple days ago on a New Tech exclusive. I wonder why I couldn't talk about that topic on a YouTube video. Who knows? Let's see. So we've got lots to talk about today. Zelensky's having a little bit of a fit. He's upset over what the NATO chief said with regards to Ukraine potentially joining NATO in the future. Some hilarity and some people are angry about that, mainly people who are very pro-Ukraine. We'll talk about the old Yeller claims against Joe Biden. Apparently in private, he's much more tantrum-prone than in public. He's fairly tantrum-prone in public, so that's not necessarily a big surprise. I personally don't really care about that particular news, but I'm going to talk about it anyway from the perspective of not caring, so, be forewarned. And also, I have a Spanish language news source here that was sent to me by a subscriber. It turns out that the Spanish climate minister did indeed fly in via private jet, take a limo ride to the venue at that recent climate event, and then bike a short distance on an e-bike, by the way, to the venue, basically for the news cameras, to make it look like she's doing her part for climate change. And I'll be talking about ClimateNIMBYism related to that also. And we'll canvass RFK Jr. Sanders, he's still going with his shtick. We've got Adam Kinzinger taking a cell phone on the concept of Trump being weak over cluster munitions, actually. And also MSNBC continuing to simp for censorship because they're extremely worried that their independent competitors will actually be able to compete with them on an even keel. And that really is what it's about. I talked about that the other day, but I'm going to reiterate because you've got a new simping piece from the legacy media. Kangastron, laugh it up, furball. I get the reference. Too bad that Harrison Ford these days is just jerry-rigged over and over again into rehashes of old beloved franchises that never really pan out as far as the old franchises are concerned. Nobody with a straight face is going to argue that new Star Wars is better than the original trilogy. They remade Blade Runner, and that was a flop, basically. They remake everything that Harrison Ford has ever been in, keeps getting remade or rehashed, and it's always a failure. I wonder why. Ashley, censorship is for sissy hypnos. Yeah, censorship has never been used for any benevolent purpose in the history of mankind. This has been pointed out multiple times, but for some reason there are some people that still lick the jackboot. We'll first talk, though, about the big news of the day. NATO has its meeting, and they've decided that NATO cannot admit Ukraine at this time. They've given no actual timetable for membership, and the reason is fairly obvious. Ukraine is currently at war. NATO's own membership requirements state that you can't be at war and join NATO. You can apply to join. You can have NATO allies, wanting you to join, but you can't actually be voted into NATO if you're currently at war. If you've been invaded or something like that, you can't join. And the NATO chief rightfully points out Ukraine at this time can't join physically, legally speaking, under the auspices of our agreement. They physically can't. And there's no timetable because we don't know when the war is going to end. We have no fucking clue what's going to happen over the next months or years. And so there's no way for us to judge when Ukraine will be, optioned into NATO if that ever happens. Zelensky is not happy about this. Zelensky decided to come out and label that absurd. He's labeling the alliance that he wants to join absurd for adhering to its own set of rules and principles. You can think what you want about NATO. I've got mixed feelings about NATO overall. It is perfectly fine for a bunch of Western nations to throw into a military alliance. NATO in and of itself is a principle. I'm not taken in by the pro-Russian argument, which is that it's somehow a terrible thing. Its actions have sometimes been imperialistic, although not always. The same is true of the Eastern Bloc countries. Sometimes they engage in colonialism, as China often does in East Africa and parts of South Asia. In some cases, its actions are not colonialist in nature. Russia has done the same thing. It may be acting defensively, but then it may also act offensively. This is the nature of military alliances. It's the nature of the use of militaries in general. But for Zelensky to come out and bite the hand that feeds him and call it absurd that the countries that are feeding him hundreds of billions of dollars, advanced weapon systems, everything under the sun, giving him the biggest support in the military sense that I think has ever been given in a proxy war by far. It's certainly larger than the aid that was given to Afghanistan when the Soviets invaded them many decades ago, even adjusted for inflation. That was mostly, here's some RPGs, here's some IEDs that, we've taught you how to construct, and hand grenades and AK-47s and shit like that. And they beat the shit out of the Soviets. Ukraine, of course, has been given Leopard tanks. It's been given Abrams tanks. It's been given anti-missile systems. It's been given, probably at this point, billions of rounds of ammo. It's been given non-lethal aid of various kinds, body armor, med kits, and everything else, logistic support. Everything that can be possibly given to them has been given to the Ukrainian military. And yet it's still not enough. NATO has to reevaluate its entire policy to allow Ukraine to join, despite the fact that part of their country has currently been de facto annexed by a foreign nation that happens to possess nuclear weapons. I think that Zelensky is off his rocker for criticizing under the circumstances, which may be why we now have that famous picture of him standing alone and looking a little bit awkward up on stage with the other NATO leaders because he shows up. He doesn't realize he's being used as a pawn. We did this with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. We did this with various forces in over time. Iran, Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, Lebanon, what others? There's a dozen of them. We propped up Pol Pot back in the 1970s. The United States propped up Pol Pot because we were more angry at the Vietnamese communists and had more of a problem with them. The United States and NATO at large have been fickle diplomatically over time. Zelensky's acting like he's the best friend of Joe Biden and that this is some great surprise. You can't join NATO. For one, they're making a good decision here, actually. When they say there's no timetable set, they're saying, we don't know when this war will or if it will end, and so we can't give you a timetable because we physically can't let you enter NATO. We're not allowed under the auspices of our own pre-agreed upon rules, and if we were to change those rules, some NATO members might leave NATO. We're not going to gobble up Ukraine and have, let's say, France leave NATO because of that disagreement, or half of East Europe all of a sudden parses off and forms its own confederated bloc like the Visegrad Group or something like that, decides to form its own sub-alliance. Not going to happen because it's not worth it. It makes no sense. It's warmongering, really. We'll be talking separately about the fucking cluster munitions, by the way. That's a big story, actually. Hunter Wadley. Wouldn't it be hilarious that Trump establishes eminent domain along the coast to bolster our shores against erosion and climate change? That would be very funny. Yeah, take the Obama's property in Martha's Vineyard. Well, you're not allowed to build that close to the coast anymore. We're going to dredge it out and buttress it, and we're going to put like marsh grasses and stuff in there to prevent the island from disappearing. That would be funny. Kent this 15 sticks preferred holster type, plastic or leather. Shout out to fellow clanker privateer leather. I only have one holster, and that's for the Glock 17, and that one is, I think, polymer actually. Aussie's Robots. Good morning. I'm sick of Zelensky and Harrison Ford. I like Harrison Ford. I feel almost sorry for him because he keeps, I mean, they offer him enormous sums of money to be in these roles, but really he has to sell his soul to the devil almost because he's like, okay, I was Indiana Jones back when Indiana Jones was actually cool. They want me to reprise the role. He reads the script and he frowns, and then he smokes more weed. He's notorious for doing this. And he says, well, they're offering me $10 million. Fucking fuck it. That's his life at this point. I feel almost sorry for him. The Patriot Cairo. Did you see the washed up corpse on Delaware Beach? No, I didn't actually. Probably a mafia kill or something like that. Awesome Diesel on Rumble. I'm expected to follow victimless rules I didn't vote for and never agreed to in the country I'm born. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if there's no victim, there should be no crime. But it's treated that way. It's horseshit, really. By the way, there are almost exactly as many people watching on Rumble as on YouTube. Let's see where those metrics can go. It's almost like watching a race, like a really slow motion horse race or something. Next news story. This is a funny one. I don't, in full honesty, I don't care if Joe Biden in private says fuck you or any of the other many things in his old man tantrums he allegedly says, calling people son of a bitches and, you know, what the fuck are you telling me? And basically, you know, going crazy on people, on staffers, on, you know, probably members of Congress, etc. Behind closed doors, when the cameras aren't rolling, Joe Biden apparently has a very foul mouth. Number one, this is not exactly breaking news. We have known, based on Joe Biden's behavior since the 1970s, that he has a short fuse. He has the Irish temper, I suppose he'd cast it off as. If he gets asked by the legacy media, he'll just say, well, you know, come on, man, I'm part Irish. I can't help it. It'll be very stereotypical and very, very funny in the process. We know that Joe Biden has a short fuse. He has since he was relatively young. We know that he has a foul mouth. In public, he has come out, challenged people to push-up contests. He's called people fat. He has pointed at people in a fairly threatening manner and disregarded their opinions and said, oh, I don't work for you and stuff like that. He's done this over and over for a number of years, and that's just the more recent examples of it. He does have a foul mouth. It doesn't surprise me in the least bit, and I really don't care because expecting him not to do that would be to deny his fundamental character. What I do find funny, though, is that leftoids will excuse this behavior while attacking Donald Trump for mean tweets. I do think it's funny among Ron DeSimps at this point that they will say that Donald Trump has done something terrible by calling Ron DeSantis a son of a bitch. They have relatively less to say about Joe Biden fundamentally doing that and much, much more, again, allegedly. If he's doing similar things, though, in public, behind closed doors, he probably is worse. That's number one. Number two, some people are chalking this up to him having Alzheimer's-addled old man tantrums, and we certainly have seen him doing so. Again, though, we have a track record of Joe Biden making similar comments, at least in some part, that goes back half a century. He does not need to be demented in order to act in that manner. Dementia brings the self to the surface. It doesn't create the self. It simply reduces the inhibition of that true self. If Joe Biden is going off repeatedly, it's not because dementia has made him an asshole. It's because he's an asshole and he's losing the capability of safeguarding his assholeness from scrutiny. How long will it be before he goes off onto a swear-laden tirade in public? If he wins a second term, the Democrats must know this. At the rate of cognitive decline that Biden is currently at, if he were to be reelected, there will come a time, 2025, 2026, somewhere probably around there, first half of his second term, in which he flips out on a reporter or he flips out on an audience member and he starts saying completely incoherent babble and swearing and insulting people or making suggestive comments or something like that. That will actually happen. Hell, one of the major selling points to the troll crowd about Biden 2024 is, hey, the dude is batshit and he's getting more batshit by the day. If we reelect him, he's going to do something totally batshit in public. Or he's going to fall down instead of up the stairs of Air Force One and break his fucking leg on live TV or something like that. This is the reason why people would vote for him at this point, because he's the crazy grandpa. He's the one that tells off-the-wall stories, doesn't know always where he is, and putters around making weird faces. This is somehow a positive for Joe Biden. As far as him being nicknamed Old Yeller because he has those tantrums in general, he could have been nicknamed that in 1979. So that's really beyond the ken of anything that I really give a fuck about. That part doesn't matter. It does tie in, though, with his dementia because he's always had that attitude. As his dementia, which is self-evident, progresses, it will become more and more and more. Can I ask people, to the 2 Biden fans that lurk on the live stream just to downvote it or something, can I ask you a rhetorical question that you would be unwilling to answer through cognitive dissonance? What happens if one of those tantrums is when he's on a foreign visit? What happens if he happens to be meeting in South Korea or France or the Czech Republic or Brazil or something? So a nation that's friendly or reasonably friendly, and there's trade ties and all these things. And he's up on stage. And this is foreign media mainly covering it, by the way. And all of a sudden he launches off. That becomes a major diplomatic incident, number one. Your party is going to look like goddamn shit, number two. And there's a reason why there are still murmurings among Democrats, and not conspiracy theory like far-right claims the Democrats are murmuring about it, but you can actually see them posting about it in real time in some cases. Murmurings about wanting to trot him off and have somebody else running. Gavin Newsom seems to be the big one that they talk about. It is a possibility. Joe Biden is old enough now and infirm enough now that he could suffer a major accident at any given time. He could fall down the stairs of Air Force One. He could suffer another aneurysm. He could suffer a stroke. He could just go into cardiac arrest. It is possible that any of these things happen. It's not necessarily very likely, but it is possible. Again, he's already lived beyond the average life expectancy of a person, and keeping in shape by biking aside, he also has had a number of spills and other accidents over the last couple of years, quite a number of them, about 7 or 8 of them over the last couple of years. There will be at least a few more, statistically speaking, before the election. And if it is falling down instead of falling up, he could literally die. There's got to be someone standing waiting in the wings at some point. Gavin Newsom's on the list. Kamala, which would be fucking hilarious. Even the DeSantis fans would say, okay, Trump gets nominated and Kamala's the one running against him. They'd be pretty comfy. They'd say, okay, he's got it in the bag. We were wrong about the whole DeSantis is the only one that can win thing, because pretty much anyone could beat Kamala Harris. Whitmer would be an outside possibility, maybe. As far as this goes, though, it doesn't chat my ass that Joe Biden says swear words. I'd be a hypocrite if I castigated the dude for swearing at other people, because I tend to have a little bit of a piratical potty mouth myself, unless I'm around my daughter, in which case I do my best to restrain myself, because, of course, she's not much more than a year old. But in other company, I say fuck and shit and all of these other wonderful words that display such a wide range of emotions depending on the cant in which you utter them. That's fine. My problem is that as the dementia continues, it could be a diplomatic incident. I don't really care about domestic incident. Okay, all of a sudden he's on stage giving the State of the Union and he starts swearing like he's got Tourette syndrome. That would just be funny. No, it'd be a major political incident and result in his 25th-ing, but nobody really cares. But if he's in a foreign nation when he does it, and that's possible, that could be definitely a problem. There's a lot of super chats here, I think. I'm doing my best to keep up with them. Didi Cortez, good morning from the Rockies in Colorado. You are our daily dose of real journalism. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your patronage. I do my best. Kenthis 15. I bet Biden swears like someone with Alzheimer's. Coincidentally. Yeah, I mean, that is true, but he had fiery tantrums to begin with. Maybe he's beat his wife up or something like that. He's like a Bill O'Reilly sort. Tasmana, daily reminder for all those Clank adjacent. Go see Sound of Freedom and make a groomer mad. Yeah, Sound of Freedom sounds pretty good. I'll be watching it when it's on streaming. Ozzy's Robots, Weekend at Bernie's turned into 4 years at DC. The Patriot Cairo. Turns out it wasn't a corpse, it was Joe Biden. Hank on the Road. Luft for President. He's our gal. Alexander the Resurrection. Thoughts on Leslie Van Houten being released. she's a decrepit old woman, so she's not exactly a threat to anyone at this point, so I support the release. Sebastian Monroe, Biden eats his poo-poo on stage and live TV. Media, Biden solves world hunger. Yeah, just fry it with some of Klaus Schwab's cockroaches. You can't tell the difference between that and a hamburger. The two Biden fans who watch Sticks. We'll just say he thought he was being mugged. Devin Selnez, Occult Feminism, the Hidden Story of Feminism. Just Pearly Things did an interview, and I think you'd like to talk about witches for suffrage. Clank, yeah, Agrippa actually had a booklet that he wrote about the divine feminine. I edited that years and years ago. LS420 Stoner, may I get a shout out for my Twitter friends Ashley, Badfuta, Kizzy, and Z? Yes, indeed you can. Ta-da! Apache, remember when Trump walked down a ramp and they said he had dementia and questioned his health for days because of it? Imagine if he felt like Biden. Yes, and there was another time when he sarcastically grabbed his water bottle with both hands, and they claimed that that was also evidence of cognitive decline. Ozzy's Robots, Biden proves competency is not required for POTUS. Yeah, apparently. Other people just run the show for you anyway, so who gives a fuck? Let's see. We've got Awesome Diesel. Listen, Fat, I'll take you behind the shed for, you know, the thing. Come on, man. King of Biltong. Good morning from Antons in Roanoke, Texas. Remember your free shipping code STICKS. Hashtag Clank Nation. Yes, you can get free shipping on your Biltong from Antons in Roanoke, Texas. You should look it up. I've had, God, I think at this point, almost a dozen people message me. Some sharing photos, by the way. Showing their biltong, and they've universally agreed upon the fact that it's good. So we'll keep it. We'll keep the customers coming. Anton, Wounded Man Productions. My cat needs an expensive MRI and surgery. Give send go under Mr. Puddlesworth needs help. Could you please pass this on? Thank you. Yes, there's Mr. Puddlesworth needs help apparently, and so you can donate if you wish under Give Send Go. Swamp Donkey. Gavin Newsom reminds me of Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. I know. Riding with Biden 24 sticks, he would challenge Kim Jong to a push-up contest. Why do I think that Kim Jong-un would win that one, despite his advanced weight? Wasted Bonehead Sticks, you forgot my Rumble rant on Monday. My apologies. I do my best to get to them all, but things move so quickly, occasionally one slips through the cracks. I do my very best. The man behind the screen. Morning Sticks from the South Cal stucco scum sprawl. I remember Biden's big fucking deal comment when Obama was in office. I do too. No way his bad language becomes worse as his dementia does. Yeah, you remember that? That was, what fucking year was that? 2013 or something? He's had plenty of time since then to improve his cognitive skills and self-awareness. Next news story is all in Spanish, so I mean, I could read it out, but I would butcher the pronunciation. Anyway, the Spanish climate minister recently, a couple days ago, was attending a climate conference. And it's sort of one of those NIMBYist conferences. You know, John Kerry will show up and Al Gore and Michael Moore maybe and all these others. People with enormous homes, private jets, limos, and sports cars and 100-acre lots that are constantly sprayed with chemicals to make them look perfect. They're living the life. They're eating the filet mignon while you're eating the cricket burger or nothing at all because of Bidenomics, basically. And this minister flew into the conference on a private jet and then got into a limo and rolled towards the venue and then got out of the limo at some point not far from the conference itself and got onto an e-bike and bicycled in with security in tow also on bicycles, although there were also a couple of vehicles there that were still following. This is climate NIMBYism. I wanted the greatest example of climate NIMBYism that I could find, and finally I found it. This is the way in which they fool the public. Look at this climate minister. Look at her riding the bike to the venue. What a strong and empowered individual. She cares about the world. Yeah, she just spent hundreds of tons of carbon in order to get there, along with her entourage and all of the other planes attendant for staff and security and so forth. But she's trying. It's like there was a story earlier. Some multimillionaire was selling his private jet because he was worried about climate change. It's like, okay, number one, somebody else will still be using it, so you haven't accomplished anything. Number two, you're still a multimillionaire. I'm sure that your house is not I'm sure you're not living in a pod. I'm sure that you're not eating nothing but cricket burgers and arugula. So what have you accomplished? You've done absolutely nothing. It's almost like the story of the widow's mite in the Bible. And as a non-Christian, I hesitate to bring this up, but it's kind of apt. The story of the widow's mite is that Jesus and his disciples and so forth were gathering money for the poor. They were trying to do charity. And a bunch of rich people came along and gave fairly lavish amounts of money. So little bags of gold and silver and shit they were giving to them. Judas was the one, by the way, in charge of managing the money. Good choice, Jesus. Anyway, then there was a widow that came in, and she had 2 mites. And a mite was a very small amount of money. It was basically nothing. Like, it might have bought a couple of bites of bread. And she puts them in, to donate. And Jesus tells his disciples that she had given more than they had, actually, because that was all she had. They gave lavish gifts, but it didn't mean anything to them. If a person who's a multimillionaire donates $1,000 to a cause, it doesn't mean anything to them. It depends on the means that the person has. If somebody has literally nothing and they take the shirt off their back and give it to a homeless person, and that's the only other shirt that they have, well, they've given quite a bit. They no longer own a shirt, and they've effectively made themselves lesser than the homeless man in that capacity. If a person who has almost nothing cooks food for the poor anyway, and does like a soup kitchen thing in their front yard, which the government will come along and shut that down for health violations really quick, they've done something that's meaningful. They're being the change they want to see in the world. If a person goes out and plants trees all day and really does reduce their carbon footprint. If you want to walk the walk, you shouldn't be the minister of climate change at all. You shouldn't even own the e-bike. You should use a manual bike, probably not even that, because, of course, aluminum and stuff, that requires fossil fuel for processing. You should convert to vegetarianism and plant trees and pick up trash all day. Because you're telling us that the planet is going to become uninhabitable within the next few decades if nothing is done, and you are literally doing nothing. You burned more fuel with the private jet, which there was a fact check on Twitter saying it wasn't really her private jet. It was from the government. Okay, it's a private jet. Nobody cares. You burned more fuel doing that than driving like 10,000 fucking miles. And yet you want people to have to switch to EVs, which are a fossil fuel run anyway, at the not at the point of delivery, but in general. As far as the electricity is concerned, where do you think it comes from? It just magically sprouts out of the ground or something like that? I have no tolerance for NIMBYists. I mean, if you want to be a hypocrite, at least go all the way. Just limo yourself into the venue and don't try to keep up appearances. I would have more respect for this bitch if she did that than the way that she did it this way. Oh, for a photo op, I'm going to get onto this e-bike that was helpfully supplied to me. Looked like she could barely ride it. Like she can ride a bike about as well as me, I guess. Ozzy's Robots. I'm Sandra Report. I don't own a private jet, nor would anyone need one. Get a jet ski instead. Probably more fun and definitely less expensive. Veteran Biker, trying to grow my veteran channel so I can move to Holland with sticks. Yes, Joseph Vanucci has a good point. Arugula is good, but these people don't really eat it very much unless it's artisanally prepared with the finest ingredients. It was grown by slaves, probably, and that makes it tastier according to them. The Bloody Nerve over on Rumble. We launched a 24/7 stream of our rock opera All Blood No Treasure on Rumble. Jack White says to bless this stream with tons of clanks. And then there is a link over on Rumble if you would like to take it. Don't worry, you get your money's worth. There's almost 2,000 people on Rumble watching live. There is still a competition between Rumble and YouTube at this time for live viewership. And Projectron 7, actually, Dr. Hook does not suck. Dr. Hook is pretty cool. My dad's favorite band, by the way. Next news story, really quickly here. RFK Jr. is meaningless, and I'm tired of people astroturfing it. I also like how the liberals are flipping out at him for simply being in the running and pretending that his supporters are conservative. RFK Jr. is at most a hyper-liberal wiffle-waffler on guns. He is an extremist with regards to the environmental regulation agenda, and he has a couple of good ideas. So on certain topics, honk honk, that we're still not allowed to mention on YouTube, he has some pertinent salient points. That's literally it. That's his qualifications. That and the fact that he's more mentally coherent than Joe Biden or Marianne Williamson. That's it. He is entirely astroturfed at this point, and unless Joe Biden were to croak or something, he has absolutely no chance whatsoever in the election. He's not going to win the Dem primaries. It's effectively impossible. By the way, I see that things are freezing up over on StreamYard. I know people can still see me, etc., on Rumble, I think. Still something wrong with YouTube right now? Maybe the stream got taken down. I get a strike or something? That'd be fun. I don't think so, though. The fuck is happening with my YouTube stream? I'm gonna go to it. Go to the live page and see. Maybe it's a problem with StreamYard, actually. Yeah, chat seems to be having a problem. Let me open this and fact check what's happening. I am still live on YouTube, although there's flies zipping around everywhere. Yeah, I guess chat decided to fuck off under the bus. Many such cases. My apologies, everyone. It was a technical glitch. But yes, as far as RFK Jr. goes, don't even bother talking about him. Like, the only reason I'm bringing it up is to caution other people just to fucking ignore him. RFK Jr. is being, at this point, astroturfed. He's meaningless. Joe Biden, unless he croaks or he's 25th or something like that, will be the Dem nominee, which is really bad for the Democrats because right now Trump is at least narrowly ahead in aggregated polling in the general and relatively ahead in a number of competitive states. So too is DeSantis, for what little it's worth, since he won't be nominee. Trump was not ahead in 2020. He was also not ahead in 2016, but managed to win anyway. If we go into the general election with statistics that look roughly at like what we're seeing now, Donald Trump will win. He will be reelected. If we go in and things have improved for him, which is entirely possible based on the trajectory of the economy, Trump will absolutely annihilate Joe Biden. If we go in and things are more hunky, like Biden has recovered a few points or something, then it's more of a 50-50 proposition. There will be no blowout for Biden. Ballot harvesting initiatives, et cetera, aside, right now, if the election were held today, I would expect Donald Trump to be reelected, honestly, based on the general polling and the polling in multiple swing states. I like how one of the selling points for other people is, well, I can win swing states and Trump can't. Even if you assume there was no honk in the 2020 election, so the numbers are real, the numbers are legit. And we're talking about losing by a couple of 100,000 votes. That's it. Donald Trump can pull in 50,000 fuckers at one rally. I don't see the problem here. All that's required is for Trump, number one, he needs to get back on Twitter. Number two, he needs to double down on the rally schedule. And number three, hold your punches in infighting within the party itself just to harden up the coalition. That's all that Trump needs to do to have, in my opinion, an 80% chance of victory in the next general election. I know that people say, people would say like, oh, Styx was wrong about 2020. Well, no, I wasn't, actually. There's a reason why YouTube decided to reverse that particular policy on disinformation with regards to election integrity. Do you think that the reason might have something to do with the mounting evidence of at least a few things having been a little fishy? Just a little bit? Because 200,000 votes is nothing in a general election. We're talking about over 150 million overall voters. And it's not exactly, it's a drop in the bucket. It's less than 1%. Ozzy's Robots, if Trump wins again, does the bureaucracy revolt again? Probably. They'll do everything that they possibly can to stop him. They're terrified of him. That's because they know that he'll actually walk the walk. They're used to people that talk the talk. They talk big during the election and then they immediately shut up the second that they're in office. Il Sarto. Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem from the Muppets and Dr. Hook sound suspiciously similar. Listen to cover of the Rolling Stone and see if you hear Animal yelling rock and roll in the background. Trip Boom. Piss off YouTube. Yeah, apparently YouTube had a little bit of a thrombo there for a moment. It went a little spastic. Next news story, really quick here, just touching on this because this is my own senator from the state of Vermont. Free ice cream for everyone. Sanders' Medicare for All would destroy America's health care. And I just want to say something. Bernard has been rambling about the same few issues now since the goddamn 1970s. And he does not appear to understand that several generations have elapsed since he had that kind of political clout. He lost the primaries twice for a reason. The Democratic Party has left him behind and consolidated behind neoliberalism. The fact that he keeps crowing about this is really, at this point, it's superfluous. Do I think that Bernie Sanders at his age intends to run for the Senate again? He's crazy if he does. People, at some point, people will say, well, do we really need a far-left Strom Thurmond character around in the Senate crepitating? Well, Bernie Sanders did have a heart attack a few years ago, and he's completely sold out his fans. It's been abandoned by the new far left, which is much, much younger. The AOCs and Rashida Tlaibs and Ilhan Omars and so forth. He's barely on the edge of the Politburo of the modern far left. Why the fuck do we keep him around? He's an old white dude. He's not woke enough for us. I think that in the end, the left may be Bernie's undoing and throw him under the bus simply because his boring message that he's been peddling for so long, they can come out of left field and attack him and say, well, you talk about all of these wonderful things, but you've accomplished literally nothing. Meanwhile, our progressive young Gen Z leaders are accomplishing X, Y, and Z. They might, in the end, be the ones that ruin Bernie Sanders. They might out-primary him from the left in Vermont itself. The Justice Dems and other groups could gobble up a Senate seat by doing so. If there's any place to do it, it would definitely be in the state of Vermont because the Democrat automatically wins there. It doesn't matter who the Republican challenger is. The Republican challenger could be better than Jesus, and there would have no chance of winning in the state of Vermont. Another reason to flee the state of Vermont, it's become a partisan la-la land with complete and total economic dysfunction, complete and total nepotistic corruption at the government level, differential legal enforcement, attacks on basically every part of the Constitution other than the 13th, and it is pointless. It's a state that shouldn't even exist at this point. It should just be rolled over with New Hampshire back into the original form. That way it'll look roughly square, and it'll actually have a population enough so that people will bother to campaign there. You know, if it were part of New Hampshire, politicians might visit Burlington. By the way, Donald Trump, I think, actually did that. It was hilarious. Pigar, any chances on a Happy Homelands reunion with Ramsey Paul? I'd be willing to do that sometime. But again, the reason I left Happy Homelands had nothing to do with any falling out or anything. I wish him well. It had to do with the scheduling. I was dragging down his schedule because, I mean, in order for me to go early afternoon my time, he had to get up early in the morning. And so now he has a better slot. He's able to manage the timing better, which is good. But yeah, I'd be willing to do that sometime. I've gotten fruit flies around. We have deployed fruit fly traps to try to lessen the horde. It's the Dutch Air Force this time of year, you see. Next news story, Adam Kinzinger, really stepping in it. His tweet simply says, Trump is weak. Oh, okay. Now, why is Trump weak, Adam? Of course, you'll remember him as the main TDS sufferer other than Liz Cheney. He's basically the male version of Liz Cheney. The reason he's not in office anymore. This is the Clash Report. Former U.S. President Donald Trump says he opposes the transfer of cluster munitions to Ukraine. Another reason to vote for Trump. Thank you, Donald, for giving me yet another talking point. We should not be giving cluster munitions to the Ukrainians. Why in hell? Why on God's green earth is it meaningful? A few hundred cluster munitions, number one, doesn't really change the tide of battle. But then when something like 10, 15% of those munitions don't even pop off and sit there like landmines and you don't necessarily know where all of them are, they get washed downriver or something, you're looking at a situation where some Ukrainian kid 10 years from now gets his leg blown off. Or some farmer is plowing up his cabbages or beets or something, and he hits one of these munitions and it destroys his tractor and vaporizes his face or something like that. Cluster munitions have been banned by more than half of the nations in the world for usage for a reason, because they are indiscriminate, or at least less discriminate than modern munitions, and they have a poor track record of actually going off when they're dropped. They have a poor track record of every one of those bomblets actually exploding. Now, if they all explode, probably half those nations wouldn't have banned them. But they have problems, logistic, technical problems, and yet we're deploying them in Ukraine now. It's pointless. It's crazy. I've seen people bragging about how they're going to be used against the retreating Russian forces. Ha, ha, ha. That's great. The problem is they're in areas that are often filled with civilians too. Some of them will be casualties. And then I hear people saying, well, yeah, but the Russians have been using them for a while. Okay, so you want to compare Ukraine to Russia now. I thought that avoiding that was your goal, to be better than Russia. We're the freedom fighters. We're the ones fighting for democracy and truth, and the Russians are all a bunch of vatniks. Well, if that's true, if the Russians are so terrible, why are you trying to emulate them? On a very limited scale, by the way, that's not even pragmatic. Joe Biden coming out the other day getting crucified for saying so. Well, this is just a temporary measure, man. Don't worry, we're going to temporarily be making more cluster munitions for a while because we basically run out of them. Acknowledging that the United States has a desperate ammunition stockpile issue at the moment. And so, I mean, Jesus Christ. And by the way, other than Zelensky's word for it, how do you know that these won't be used against civilians anyway across the border? There have been drone attacks across the border. Is Zelensky's military the Great White Army? Are they the they're the upstanding crusaders? They're very biblical. They pray before battle, et cetera, et cetera. They're blameless. They've gone to the altar and been blessed. All these things. And then Russia is it's a pile of orcs. This is war propaganda. This is the kind of one-sidedness that we see over and over and over again. There aren't any good guys in this kind of war. Everyone's going to resort to desperate measures anyway. Why wouldn't they? They want to win. And so to posit a scenario in which cluster munitions are used against a retreating force that you're not supposed to be firing at because they're actively attempting to retreat, or civilians, dissidents of some sort, is not beyond the pale. Nobody's taking that into consideration. Ozzy's robots. Imagine 80-year-old Botoxed AOC with painted brows. Ugh. Yeah, she look like Nancy Pelosi, kind of. Iggy the Incubus. Trump is weak because he doesn't want to commit war crimes is not the own I think they think it is. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at this and I was chuckling, and I mean, he got basically ratioed for a reason. SB Elite. Thoughts on the BRICS currency gold-backed thing? That appears to be mostly spurious. It is a potential thing for the future, but they've been talking about it for like 10 years. So I think I saw that back in the early 2010s. I'll remain skeptical because gold backing the currency is not actually the win that most people think. Durin Albane, Dr. Oak changed from a sex and drugs ban to a love ballad ban. Yes, with sexy eyes and some of their latter-day disco work. Yes, they definitely changed, but that is when they hit the charts. The Patriot Cairo. Canada and UK opposed cluster munitions, but orange ban ban. Yeah, most of our allies have banned their usage. How is Trump wrong? Is Adam Kinzinger going to come out and say half the civilized world are a bunch of ignorant morons? They're weak. The British are weak. The French are weak. I think they've banned them too. Scandinavians, basically, most of NATO is weak because they oppose the use of these munitions. The editorial board of the New York Times, not exactly Orange Man good territory, condemned the usage too the other day. The New York Times editorial board agrees with Donald Trump at the moment on this issue. I don't think Adam knows what he's fucking talking about. No, we shouldn't be sending cluster munitions. We shouldn't be sending anything at this point to Ukraine. How many hundreds of billions more do we need? Trump came out with an ad the other day, another platform video, where he's like, well, for the amount we've sent to Ukraine, we could house every homeless veteran in the United States. I think that's an understatement. I think we could house a lot more people for that same cost. And we could have, at the same time, secured the entire U.S. border. We could have done all this for the cost of getting involved in a foreign theater that we don't really have any reason to be involved in at this point. We've done the best we can. It's time to sit back and allow the Ukrainian people, they can go ahead and defend themselves. We can give them logistic support. We can go ahead and wish them the best. But how much more we expect? We're exhausting our ammo stockpiles. We're running out of actual military munitions to utilize. How many more are we going to send? For apparently no reason. It doesn't appear that there's much progress on the Ukrainian offensive. What are we actually accomplishing? The world may never know. He's saying that my audio is bad. No, my microphone should be the proper one. It might be something on your end. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, let's send something that half the world has banned and much of the rest of the world at least considers to be regrettable, generally speaking. Let's send that to Ukraine. It'll win us hearts and minds. Mostly splattered on the the side of a farm or something like that. And then the final news story, this is from MSNBC. Why a judge blocking Biden from contacting Twitter isn't actually a free speech win. First Amendment scholars, by which you mean like CRT influenced ones, I'm sure, and advocates say the ruling is too broad and partisan to advance free expression. Yes, if you don't allow the United States government to work around the First Amendment by getting people banned or demoted in some way by using third parties, the companies that control the modern public square, digital discourse is basically where it's at, then you don't actually support the First Amendment. Here's why. And a long screed of bullshit, basically. You can read the article for yourself. I don't even want to have to read it again because it's just so fucking stupid. I'll read the first part, though. A federal judge ruled Tuesday, so some time ago, that the Biden administration must cease contacting social media companies about a broad range of online content, including the administration's efforts to flag misinformation. The judge said some of the admin's past communications with social media companies violated the First Amendment. They really did. And said that during the pandemic, the government assumed a role similar to an Orwellian ministry of truth. Now, the audio is really bad. I have no clue if people are joking or not. We have an issue on Rumble now. Here, let me listen to myself really quickly. My apologies, everyone. I don't know if you can even fucking hear me at this point. I fucking hate it when this shit happens. Never happened. Oh, yeah, my testing. 1, 2, 3. I don't hear any problem myself. At least on Rumble. I think people are pulling my leg. I think I've been trolled. Anyway, as far as here, I'm gonna take this shit off. Anyway, as far as what was I fucking even talking about now? I got totally distracted. Anyway, about this, MSNBC's main cope on this was that if the government didn't have the right to criticize people for saying wrong things, that it was somehow a problem. But the thing is that that's not what the case even pertains to. The case pertains to the government attempting to use a First Amendment workaround, circumventing the ability of people to express themselves by going through third parties. MSNBC alludes to the concept that this ruling somehow prevents members of the government from criticizing people who are saying things about them that are provably untrue. And so that's what I wanted to talk about. Anyway, we're clearly having some bad problems technically today, so I'm going to go offline a little bit early here. I'm going to I'll look into it. Maybe my connection might be loose. It could be some problem with YouTube and Rumble. It's probably on my end since it was both of them. Please send no more super chats, but I will get to these last couple. Iggy the Incubus. Hilariously, the first thing that came through that was clear on YouTube was you saying you were going to put your headphones in to check. Interesting. Yeah, maybe it was a loose connection down there, and when I jiggled the computer, it solved itself. It's possible. Miku Huntu 4X bot. Audio actually was bad for a sec. We are not schizos. No, I just thought that it might have been people taking up like a troll line there, just to rib me a little bit. But apparently it was my problem. SP Elite, lol, audio was actually bad, but of course, as soon as you check it, it magically gets fixed. Yeah, I didn't get to hear my tinny voice. I've been gypped. Lego Creation 06, you sound like 1960s sci-fi movie. I hope that that's on the replay so that I can get to it. And yeah, I'll sign off now. I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully with a better connection. I'll make sure that everything's jiggled down there, and hopefully that won't fucking happen again. Anyway, the last news story was sort of a throwaway anyway. It's a reiteration of what MSNBC has already been fucking simping for. It's just that their particular simping is so far beyond the pale, completely miscasting the actual purpose of the legal case against the Biden administration and straw manning it, basically. You know, it's not just a straw man, it's several logical fallacies at once. So yeah, I'll be back tomorrow with more news stories, and I'll go on a news dig as soon as possible. That's about all. Peace out.